Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of the top 10? Top 10 cringiest things in wrestling. Now for this, it could just be a moment, it could be a promo, or it could be a wrestler altogether. And when I say cringiest, this isn't necessarily the worst or stuff that I don't necessarily like. These are the things that if you had a friend or a relative, your wife, husband, cousin, neighbor, best friend, walked into the room and seen you watching these, you would cringe at the thought that that's what they think wrestling is. With that being said, let's start off the list. Our number 10, The Wedding of Billy and Chuck. Now don't get me wrong on this, I don't think that a gay couple being married on a wrestling show is necessarily cringy in itself. The portrayal, however, and the fact that it was all a ruse to set up a big thing with Eric Bischoff is more where the cringe comes in. Leading up to this, the WWE got a lot of publicity, a lot of positive publicity for their portrayal of the two and having them being world champions. Going off of this, I think they lost all that and even got some complaints. For that reason, I'd have to put it on this list because it did feel really cringy. It felt like just another stereotype thing, and in my opinion, I wouldn't have wanted anyone else to watch that wasn't a wrestling fan because they would get a bad opinion of it, which is kind of the theme I'm going with for this. Now going from that, our number 9, The Goon. This one might be more personal to me. I have a lot of family and friends that are big time hockey fans. My mom was a huge hockey fan. My uncle's a huge hockey fan. My best friend is a big time hockey fan, so much so that he still plays rec league hockey. I grew up playing hockey, street hockey with everybody. So for us, or people that are hockey fans, much like baseball fans are probably thinking that Abe Knuckleball Schwartz is an embarrassment, we thought that the Goon was an embarrassment. I mean, it was not good. I mean, the wrestler himself, Wild Bill Irwin, is really a good wrestler, and I liked a lot of his work, especially in the 80s, as either by himself or with his brother, Scott Irwin. However, this character was just silly. Everything from the over-exaggerated boots to the penalty box stuff and the way he was dressed, it was just embarrassing, especially, like I said, coming from a family of hockey fans. This just was embarrassing to watch and embarrassing to be a part of. I know there was a lot of gimmicks during this time that could fall onto this list. Sparky Plug, TL Hopper, Duke the Dumpster Drozy. This is my personal worst of those, in my opinion. I think it's one of the worst gimmicks of all time, and it's probably one of the most embarrassing gimmicks of all time. I'm going from that, our number 8. From right around the same time period, over in the world of WCW, the Dungeon of Doom. Now don't get me wrong, most of the wrestlers that comprise the Dungeon of Doom are people I love. Kevin Sullivan is someone I really love. Earthquake, aka The Shark, Kamala. Beefcake I like. Beefcake's probably the person I like the least that was involved with it. Ming was amazing. Curtis Iaukea I think is awesome, especially when you go back and watch some of his stuff from Florida. However, at the time, with the videos they were doing, it was just silliness. This felt like they were trying to force B-movie creature features into pro wrestling and trying to almost set back wrestling a decade, if not more. It never felt like they were serious. It never felt like anything here was going to be a threat to Hulk Hogan, who was the champion, who was their main foil at the time. It always felt like this was just a setup for Hulkamania to get rid of the bad guys, to get rid of the evil like he always did. A lot of people think it's one of the worst gimmicks of all time. I kind of liked it, to be honest with you, but I could see the cringiness. I could see someone walking in on these promos, walking in on the backstage interviews, and just giggling and laughing at it, because I giggled and laughed at it. For that reason, it makes my list. Now going from that, our number 7, the Marina Shafira promo. This is cringy for the reasons that most things are cringy. You just kind of feel bad for Marina. I personally think that she's a very solid wrestler and thought that she was a very good MMA fighter. However, this promo went off the rails and went off the rails quickly. I don't know if she got lost out there, if it being her hometown, which she alluded to, that threw her off. I don't know if it's just promos in general, but the combination of what was said in the promo and the silly hat that she was wearing made this one of the cringiest things in recent history, in my opinion. I feel bad for Marina. I know she's better than this. I hope at some point we get to see some kind of redemption, because I think she deserves better. I'll go from that on number 6. PN News. And again, this is no knock on the wrestler, no knock on the talent involved. But PN News was a guy that's probably about 400 pounds, looked like me basically, rapping in the early 90s in a very dated rap style that felt like more like Curtis Blow than it did anything that was happening at the time. You gotta remember when PN News was on TV, we're right there at the beginning of NWA, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest. We're not that far off from people like Nas and Wu-Tang Clan and Biggie Smalls and Tupac getting involved. And he's rapping like he's in the Sugar Hill Gang. And it's not even the fact that the raps were bad. It's the whole package. The more PN News matches you watch, the more embarrassing it becomes. And it was just silly and goofy. I don't know who thought this was good or who greenlit this. Out of all of the rapping gimmicks, I mean, Max Caster does a pretty good job right now. The Cena one was pretty good. Men on a Mission probably falls in with this, but they're a little bit better than PN News. The problem with doing a rap gimmick is rap evolves so fast that by the time you fully flesh out a gimmick and get it on TV, rap has already moved by and they're on to a different style and you're already dated. Case in point, if someone were to put on a song like Panda by Designer, which is only a few years old, it already sounds ancient, which is part of the reason why this was so bad. Just a bad gimmick. Everything about it was embarrassing, hence why it makes my list. Our number 5, from the land of TNA, the Johnsons, aka the Shane Twins, aka Gemini. You may or may not have seen this because this was during the pay-per-view era of TNA, and if you didn't plop down $10 a show to watch that, I don't blame you, but I'll give you a quick representation of what it was, and you can see by the picture here. This was two guys that came out in full body suits, and the connotation was that they were Johnsons, which is a slang term for a male reproductive part. And I don't know how much further I could go with that without being demonetized for this show, but yeah, that's what it was. It was two guys, the Johnsons. They were supposed to look like Johnsons. Just embarrassing and silly. One of the goofy things, there's a lot of goofy things on those early TNA shows. Puppet, the Psycho Dwarf, Cheeks, other stuff on there, which if you look it out, you could probably find it and laugh. Again, one of those things that if your friends or family saw this, they would be like, what the heck are you watching? Again, hence why it makes the list. I'll go from that, our number 4. When Vince McMahon made Trish Stratus bark like a dog. This was embarrassing. This was degrading. This was chauvinistic. This was every bad thing you could say about it. Every complaint that outsiders have about pro wrestling and the content of pro wrestling is right in this video. If you watch this, it's demeaning, it's repulsive. I don't know what went through their mind and what made them think this was a good thing to do, but yeah, I would have hated for my mom, my sister, a girlfriend, a wife to come by, a daughter, and see this and think that I'm watching shows that treat women this way. Just an embarrassing moment. Hence why it's on our list. I'll go from that, our number 3, Mantar. The gimmick of Mantar was a half man, half bull, and he would wear a buffalo head out to the ring, and it was just ridiculous. Coming from around the same era of the Dungeon of Doom and the Goon, I think he was a little bit predating those guys. It wasn't a character that lasted very long, but it burned an indelible mark in your psyche on one of the worst gimmicks of all time and the what the heck they were kind of thinking aspect of it. This was just silly and goofy, and again, much like I said with Trish Stratus, this is the kind of thing that when non-wrestling fans talk bad about wrestling, this is what they think it looks like, because at times it looks like this. Just another one of those things that's very cringeworthy, and hence why it makes my list. Going from that, our number 2, the Rake and Michael Cole incident. I have to tread very lightly here, much like I did with the Johnsons. The best I could say is Rake had Michael Cole in the backstage area, read him a poem while seemingly assaulting, and it was very uncomfortable to watch, very weird. It was them trying to push the envelope, and they pushed it a little bit too far. It's a topic that a lot of people aren't really comfortable with talking about, especially on a silly wrestling show. It waited there, they did it, hence why it came to my list. Now, before I get to my number one, I want to talk about a couple things that didn't make the list, basically the best of the rest. First off, Karrion Kross and his helmet. Most gimmicks nowadays aren't as cringeworthy as they were in the 90s or even in the Ruthless Aggression era. They seem to be more grounded, more based in reality. Every now and again we do get something very silly. This was one of those times. You took a wrestler who has an aura about him, has a believability, and you flush it right down the toilet by putting him in the gladiator helmet and quasi-demolition looking gear, and then you do even more harm by having him lose immediately. This was just a silly way, and I don't know why anyone, Vince McMahon, thought this would get over, but they tried it, it failed, he got fired, he had to come back. They're not doing so great with him at the time of this recording. I think he can be redeemed, but this was just bad. Now, last but not least, on our best of the rest, Jeff Hardy's inner monologue. This was done as something on TNA Wrestling for a couple weeks when Jeff Hardy was a world champion, and you would see him walk through the hallway and walk past wrestlers, and as he was walking by, you could hear Jeff Hardy's thoughts. There's a lot of times as wrestling fans we're asked to just accept some things, like why is a camera back here in this area when someone gets attacked. However, I think this is a step too far to ask us. There's no way without him vocalizing it that we should know what Jeff Hardy was saying. It was just weird and off-putting, and it took a guy that's probably one of the most popular wrestlers of the last 2 decades and made him an absolute goof, in my opinion. Just a very silly thing. Again, another thing I don't want my family or friends to ever see. Now, before I go to our number one, if you think I left something off the list, put something too high, something down too low, let me know in the comments. While you're there, smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a member. Becoming a member really helps out the page. There are benefits like early access to videos, preferential treatment on suggestions, as well as shoutouts on the video. What's up, Chris? With all that being said, I would really appreciate it if you thought about it and decided to click it. With that being said, let's jump to our number one, the most cringeworthy thing in pro wrestling, Katie Vick. How do you take a feud that involves 2 of the best WWE wrestlers of the time, 2 guys that I absolutely love, I love watching their matches, and you ruin it? Well, again, this is another one I have to tread a little lightly. You involve a cheerleader that passed away because of Kane in an incident when he was a teenager, and Triple H dressing up and pretending to be Kane and having his way with a dead Katie Vick, or what was basically a mannequin. When people bring up some of the worst things that have happened in wrestling, this is always right at the top of the list, and for very good reasons. It was in bad taste, it wasn't funny, it was weird, it pushed the envelope in a really wrong way. Just an uninteresting thing from 2 of the better wrestlers they had at the time that could have told a better story if given absolutely anything else. To me, it is the most cringeworthy thing in my time in being a wrestling fan, and I would probably guess for most of you that are watching this, you probably feel the same way. With all that being said, if you made it to the end of the video, let me know your most cringeworthy moment in wrestling. Put it down here in the comments. My name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.